This tutorial is going to explain how to get started with VST Instruments in Cubase. A VST instrument is a software synthesizer that can be controlled via MIDI from inside a hosting application such as Cubase. VST Instruments are separate pieces of software that run inside Cubase as plugins. They can also run inside a number of other audio applications that support VST Instruments. In this case, I've already created a project which I'm going to be using, so I'm going to open that from the File menu. The project is inside a folder on the D drive of the computer, this folder here called My VSTi Project. So I'm going to go into that folder. There's the Cubase project file with the .cpr file extension, and I'm going to open that by double-clicking on it. And now we can see our familiar empty Cubase project. Right-clicking inside the track list area, I get a menu with a list of all the different types of track I can create, and I'm going to choose the option Add Instrument Track. This isn't the only way of creating a VST instrument in Cubase, but it is probably the quickest and easiest to get started with. So click there, and I get a dialog box asking me which instrument that I want to choose. It's important to understand that a VST instrument isn't part of Cubase. It's a separate piece of software that you can use inside Cubase. In this case, I'm going to be using an instrument which I downloaded from this website here, which has various different free downloadable VST instruments. So if I click on this little triangle here, I'll get a menu showing me all of the VST instruments that are installed on this particular computer. I'm going to choose the GTG Synths folder, the instrument called GTG44S. Click OK, and my instrument track has now been created. Looking at the inspector section of the interface, which is this area here, this setting here, the MIDI input routing, tells me which MIDI device is going to be used to control this instrument track here. If I click on it, I can see a list of all of the MIDI devices which are installed on the computer. At the moment, the setting is set to all MIDI inputs, meaning that if I have a MIDI controller keyboard connected to any of the MIDI inputs of the computer, the MIDI instructions from that keyboard controller are going to find their way to this track here. The instrument on the instrument track is the one that we've just chosen. If I click here, I can see the list again, and I could choose a different instrument if I want. This icon here, Edit Instrument, if I click on that, it will show me the instrument itself, the graphical user interface for the VST instrument itself. And sometimes what you find is that the window will disappear. If you click somewhere else, the VST's graphical user interface is now behind the Cubase window. I can get that back by clicking this off and back on again. So that's the graphical user interface of the VST instrument. And in this case, I can actually play the instrument using the mouse. Not all instruments will let you do that, but this particular instrument will. So I can close that now for the time being. On the instrument track itself, this button here is the Record Enable button. If the track is record enabled, then the button will be red as it is now. If the track isn't record enabled, I've just disenabled it by clicking, the Record Enable button will be grey. Assuming that the track is record enabled and that the MIDI settings are correct, I can then use the MIDI keyboard controller connected to the computer to play that instrument in real time. Notice that as I play MIDI notes, I can see activity in this area of the transport bar. The red meter that's jumping up and down indicates that MIDI messages are being received by Cubase. So when I play a note in a moment, you'll see this indicator move. we saw the indicator jump up there once for the note on message, meaning that Cubase has received a MIDI note, and then once again when I released the key to indicate that Cubase had received the note off message. While you're playing the instrument with the keyboard, at this point you may or may not notice that there's a bit of a delay between when you play the note on the keyboard and when you hear the sound. Now, if you do notice a perceptible delay, this could be due to the audio driver that you're using. You can change this setting by visiting the Devices menu, the bottom menu option called Device Setup. If I click on there and then click on the VST Audio System setting, this menu here, if I were to click on this drop-down menu here, would give me a list of all of the audio drivers that are available on the computer. I'm not going to change it because I have the correct driver selected, which is an ASIO driver. That means that I'm going to get a good input and output latency. You can see only 5 milliseconds here, meaning that I shouldn't experience a delay between when I press the keys on the MIDI keyboard and when I hear the sound. If you have a different driver selected, you may notice that these latency figures are much higher, and that explains why you get the delay. You can resolve the problem by dropping down the menu and choosing the ASIO driver from it and then clicking on OK. Because my settings are OK as they are, I'm just going to hit cancel. So, returning to the inspector, recall that the inspector shows the settings for the currently selected track. This drop-down menu here, which is called the patch selector, if the instrument that I have loaded has any preset sounds, which this one does, I can choose between them by dropping down this menu here. And now this is a list of all of the different preset sounds that are available on this particular instrument. I'm going to choose Electro Clap. And now, if I play the instrument using the keyboard, we'll hear that the sound has changed. Assuming that the track is still record enabled, if I then hit the record button on the transport, we're going to see the cursor advancing along the timeline, and any notes that I play on the keyboard will be recorded inside MIDI events on the track that has the record enable selected. So I'm going to hit record and record some notes. Notice as I play the notes, they appear in the MIDI event that's being created on the timeline. And then hit stop to stop recording. I can then play back those notes by returning the cursor to the start of the timeline. I could either do that by clicking inside the ruler with the mouse or by using the keyboard shortcut. If you press the dot key on the numeric keypad, this will return the cursor back to the start of the timeline, like so. And then if I were to hit play, I could hear these notes back again. Again, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is the spacebar. So as the cursor passes over the MIDI notes, I hear them play back.